Smoke hung low in the sky, a dirty gray veil stretching across Gaza's morning horizon. Rubble lay like broken bones of once living homes, cracked open by the weight of war. In the middle of it all, Layla stood barefoot, her abaya torn and dust-streaked, cradling her 6-month-old daughter close to her chest. The baby's lips, dry and cracked, trembled with soundless sobs. No more tears. No more strength. Only the hollow rhythm of her heartbeat against her mother's ribs. Layla's own body was shaking, not from fear anymore, but from exhaustion, and from the silence that followed too many explosions. She looked down at her baby. "Mariam," she whispered, rocking gently. "Please don't cry." But the child did, faintly, stubbornly, like a whisper the world kept ignoring. Just hours ago, they'd had a corner of a tent. Before the strike, before the screams, before her world crumbled again. The wind picked up, lifting ashes like snow. From beneath her niqab, Layla's eyes scanned the horizon, desperate. Somewhere, anywhere, water. She knew Mariam's cries weren't just hunger. It was thirst. A slow, invisible dagger. The kind Karbala knew. The kind Lady Rubab once watched consume her son. A shrill scream echoed down the narrow alley of shattered walls. Layla flinched, pulling Mariam tighter, hiding behind a charred piece of concrete. Her breathing slowed as a drone buzzed overhead. Silence returned. The world had gotten good at pausing after screams, as if holding its breath out of guilt. When she emerged, a figure waited at the corner. A boy. Skinny, no older than 12. His shirt was too big, his pants too short, and his feet bare. He held a rusted can of water and stared at her with wide, stubborn eyes. "Do you need help?" he asked. Layla didn't answer at first. She studied him. The boy looked like war had raised him. But his eyes held something else too, defiance. "My daughter," she finally said. "She needs water." He nodded, unscrewed the tin cap, and held it out. Layla hesitated, then took it, letting the last ounce of lukewarm, muddy water trickle into Mariam's mouth. The baby whimpered, swallowed weakly, then quieted, for the first time in hours. "She reminds me of him," the boy said. Layla frowned. "Who?" "The baby from Karbala. The one they called Ali Asghar." She froze. It was a name she hadn't heard in months. Not since the days when she taught history at the university, before the war, before she became a widow, before she was reduced to wandering ruins. "You know of Karbala?" The boy nodded. "My father told me stories. Before they found him." She didn't ask what that meant. She already knew. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Haidar. And you live here?" "I survive here," he said with a faint smirk. "Come. It's not safe out in the open." Layla hesitated, glancing behind her. There was nothing left to go back to. She followed him, stepping over cracked stones, twisted metal, and scorched toys. He led her to a small hollow beneath a collapsed building, a shelter of sorts, lined with old cloth, a broken fan, and a few scattered cans. Layla lowered herself to the floor, her arms wrapped protectively around Mariam. "Do you stay here alone?" she asked. "Mostly. Sometimes others come. But I don't trust many." He sat down across from her, pulling out a worn Quran from under a box. "When the bombs fall," I read this. "I like the parts about Hussain. He didn't give up. Even when everything was burning." Layla looked at him, a lump rising in her throat. He reminded her of her younger brother, before tanks rolled into their village. Before he disappeared on a supply run and never came back. "You're brave," she said. "No," Haidar replied, opening the Quran. "Just used to pain." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of shared ache. Mariam stirred. Her little hand reached out and brushed against Haidar's knee. He looked down, startled, then smiled. "She's strong," he said. "She has to be," Layla whispered. "She has no choice." That night they sat in darkness, only a faint oil lamp flickering. The sky outside lit up in intervals. Lightning or fire, it was hard to tell. Haidar spoke softly, telling Layla the story of Karbala as he knew it. Of the grandson of the Prophet, of thirst, of bravery, of Ali Asghar, raised in the arms of his father, offered not as a warrior, but as a plea for mercy. And they still fired, Haidar said. Straight through his throat. Layla closed her eyes, Maryam nestled against her heart. That story had once been a historical moment, a lesson in her lectures. But tonight it wasn't a lesson. It was a mirror. Her daughter's small body, her dry lips, her quiet cries, they weren't echoes of Karbala. They were Karbala. I used to teach, she said suddenly, as if confessing, Islamic history. I told my students that Karbala was about standing for truth, but I didn't know what it meant, not until now. Haidar didn't respond, just looked at her, the kind of look only those who had seen too much could give. A sudden roar shook the walls. The ground trembled. Dust filled the air. Layla dove over Maryam, shielding her with her own body. It was over in seconds. A nearby building had collapsed. Maryam cried, loudly this time. Layla rocked her, whispering, "Hush, my little Asghar, hush." The name slipped from her lips like a prayer she didn't know she still believed in. When silence returned, Layla looked at Haidar. "If I die, will you take her?" "You're not going to die," he said. "You don't know that." He nodded solemnly. "I'll take her. But she won't be alone. Not while I breathe." Layla placed Maryam into his lap for a moment, and Haidar stared down at her tiny face. Her eyes were open now, quietly blinking at the boy holding her. He didn't smile, just whispered, "Your cry will shake the sky." Just like his did. Layla reached into her satchel and pulled out a small strip of cloth. It was all she had left from her husband's keffiyeh. She wrapped it gently around Maryam's shoulders. "She'll wear her father's colors," Layla said. "Like Ali Asghar wore his father's arms." Outside, another round of explosions began. But inside, in that tiny shelter under the ruins, Layla, Haidar, and a 6-month-old child sat quietly, 3 breaths of resistance in a land choking on smoke. And as the walls shook again, Layla whispered, "If they silenced Asghar once, let them hear her cry now." The wind howled through the cracks above, and Maryam let out one piercing wail, clear, defiant, alive. The next morning arrived without sunlight. The sky over Gaza remained thick and smothered, a dull amber that flickered between smoke and dust. Layla opened her eyes slowly. Her body ached, and every breath felt borrowed. Maryam still lay curled against her chest, her small chest rising with shallow breaths. Haidar was already awake, sitting near the entrance of the shelter, his knees tucked into his chest, watching the horizon as if trying to guess where the next shadow would fall. She joined him without a word. They sat together, 2 strangers bound by war, watching a world fall apart piece by piece. "She didn't cry last night," Haidar said softly. Layla nodded. "She's too tired. Too empty." He hesitated before speaking again. "There's a clinic. Not far. Hidden under what's left of the old school. A doctor works there. He's old, but he knows things. Maybe he can help her." "Is it safe?" "No. Nothing is. But he's real. I've seen him stitch wounds with no lights, deliver babies with one hand while holding rubble with the other." Layla looked at Maryam, pale and still. She thought of Ali Asghar, how the arms that held him were strong, yet helpless. She would not be helpless. Not again. "Take me there," she said. They waited until dusk. Shadows were safer than sunlight. Haidar moved with familiarity through the ruins, guiding her past collapsed minarets and cratered courtyards. Twice they had to duck into alleyways as drones hummed above. Once, they passed the body of a child with a toy still clutched in his hand. Layla turned Maryam's face away instinctively, as if shielding her from a truth she already embodied. The clinic was nothing more than a basement, the steps to it half buried in cement. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of iodine, sweat, and something darker. A man, stooped with age and dressed in faded army green, looked up as they entered. His beard was streaked with gray, and his hands were wrapped in gauze, blood seeping through the cloth. "Dr. Yusuf?" Haidar asked. The man nodded. His eyes moved to Layla and the bundle in her arms. He approached silently, holding out his hands. Layla hesitated before placing Maryam into them. "She's been without water," she said. "For too long. She breathes, but not deeply. She cries, but not always." Dr. Yusuf knelt, pressing a stethoscope to her chest. He touched her forehead, her lips. Then he looked up. "She's dehydrated. Weak. Her muscles are locking up. If we don't find clean water soon, her organs will fail." Layla's heart cracked again. The same way it had when her husband didn't return. When the bombs began. When the neighbors vanished. "What can we do?" she asked. The doctor stood. "There's a convoy coming in tomorrow. 8 supplies. They'll be allowed through the north corridor. Mothers and children first. You could take her. She might have a chance." Layla blinked. "And you?" "I stay. My work is here. These people, they have no one else." Haidar stepped forward. "And me?" Dr. Yusuf's voice was gentle. "You're old enough to be forgotten. Young enough to be ignored. They won't take you." The silence in the room was like a wound no one could close. "I won't go without him," Layla said. "You should," the doctor replied. "Because if she dies here, her death will be unseen. Out there, she might live. She might matter." Layla stood, taking Maryam back into her arms. The child barely stirred. Layla's mind spun, memories flooding her, of classrooms filled with young women eager to understand history. Of her own voice speaking passionately about Hussain, about sacrifice, about meaning. Now those lessons lived in her arms, fragile and real. "She already matters," Layla said. "Even if no one sees her." Dr. Yusuf gave a faint nod, as if recognizing something ancient in her voice. That night, they stayed in the basement. Layla barely slept. She cradled Maryam, her lips pressed to her daughter's forehead. Every breath from the child was a whisper of time slipping away. In the dim corner, Haidar sat beside Dr. Yusuf, asking questions. The old man spoke in low tones about wounds and war, about stitching and letting go. Layla listened without looking. Something inside her had shifted. The decision was no longer whether to flee or fight. It was about purpose, about who she would be when the smoke cleared, if it ever did. As dawn approached, Dr. Yusuf handed her a folded cloth. Inside it, a small vial of clean water. "This is all I have," he said. "It may not be enough, but it's something." Layla held it to Maryam's lips. The baby stirred, her mouth moving slowly, instinctively. A few drops fell inside. Her eyelids fluttered. Then she slept again, but softer, more peaceful. Dr. Yusuf watched carefully. "She has strength in her. Just like he did." Layla didn't need to ask who he meant. Outside, the distant roar of engines began to echo through the silence. The aid convoy. Its arrival meant choices. Final ones. "I will not leave," Layla said. "I have her. I have him." She pointed to Haidar. "I have your stories. That's enough." The doctor smiled, tired but proud. "Then stay. But stay ready." She nodded. As the first rays of morning pierced the dust, Layla walked to the mouth of the shelter. She looked toward the horizon where the sun tried to break through, where help may or may not arrive, where the world may or may not care. Behind her, Maryam let out a tiny, breathy cry. Not loud, but enough. Layla turned, lifted her daughter gently into her arms, and whispered, "Let them hear you." Like they once heard Ali Asghar. The air was heavy with the promise of another attack. Layla sat in the narrow corridor of the underground shelter, Maryam sleeping against her chest, her tiny fists curled around a strip of her father's old keffiyeh. Haidar leaned against the opposite wall, sharpening a rusted piece of metal, not as a weapon but out of nervous habit. Dr. Yusuf paced slowly, his limp more pronounced now, his face drawn, jaw tight with the weight of too many days without rest. Outside, the ground shuddered now and then with distant impact. each one a reminder that safety was an illusion, and time borrowed. A message had arrived, slipped through from a fleeing aid worker. The clinic was now marked. The shelter would be targeted within the next 12 hours. They had a choice: run into the open or stay and risk being buried alive. Layla held Miriam closer. Her skin was warmer now, her breathing steadier. The small sips of water had done something. Maybe not everything, but enough to spark hope, a fragile, living hope. And that terrified her. Because hope in Gaza came at a cost. If you let yourself believe, you had more to lose. We can't keep her here, Dr. Yusuf said at last. She has to be taken out. Even if it's just her. There's a smuggler route through the eastern wall. Dangerous. But it leads to the abandoned orchard. There's a chance. Layla looked at him, her voice hollow. You want me to hand her off to strangers? Send her through tunnels like a parcel? I want her to live, he replied. That's all I want. Haidar stood, eyes blazing. I'll take her. The room fell silent. Layla stared at him. You're just a boy. I'm fast. I know the tunnels. I've done it before, for food, for medicine. I can do it for her. Layla shook her head, but Haidar stepped forward. You once told me her cry could shake the skies. But only if she lives long enough to be heard. She looked down at Miriam. Her face was peaceful again, unaware of the storm waiting beyond her breath. Dr. Yusuf placed a small pouch in Haidar's hands. Medicines. Cloth. A note. If she makes it to the other side, they'll know who she is. Where she came from. Haidar nodded. Layla hesitated, her heart splitting down the middle. This wasn't surrender. This was the most painful kind of courage. She pressed her lips to Miriam's forehead, inhaling her daughter's scent one last time, memorizing it. A scent of dust and milk and something eternal. She wrapped her in the keffiyeh, tucking her close to Haidar's chest, securing her gently. Miriam stirred but didn't cry. She simply blinked, eyes wide open, as though sensing that this moment mattered. If anything happens, Layla began. She'll live, Haidar interrupted, his voice steady. She'll live for all of us. He turned and vanished into the passageway, swallowed by shadows. The silence that followed was unbearable. Layla stood frozen, each heartbeat thunderous. Dr. Yusuf sat beside her but said nothing. Words would only cheapen the moment. She closed her eyes and began to recite, softly, slowly, the same lullaby she used to sing when Miriam was still in her belly. A lullaby about stars and safety. A lullaby that didn't belong in a place like Gaza, yet somehow made sense. Time lost meaning. Minutes felt like hours. She didn't know whether Haidar had made it, whether Miriam was still breathing. All she had was memory, and faith stitched together with pain. Then, footstep. Not one, but many. Echoing through the broken stone hallway. Layla and Dr. Yusuf rose. The door cracked open, and Haidar stumbled in, bleeding from his leg, face scraped and blackened with soot. But in his arms, wrapped tight, Miriam blinked up at the world again. Layla dropped to her knees, tears falling freely now, too heavy to hold back. She took her daughter, sobbing with gratitude and heartbreak. Haidar collapsed beside her, exhaling a breath of fire and relief. They tried to stop me, he muttered. Snipers on the roof. I had to crawl. But I made it. Layla kissed his forehead. You did more than that. Dr. Yusuf bandaged Haidar's leg, his hands trembling. He didn't speak, only worked, silently honoring the boy who'd done what most men wouldn't. Outside, the night was beginning to crack open with shellfire. But inside, in that trembling shelter, a decision had been made. They would not run. They would not vanish. Not this time. Layla rose, holding Miriam in one arm and reaching into her bag with the other. She pulled out the only thing she had left, a red scarf. She dipped it into a basin of water stained with her own blood. Then she took a piece of chalk and wrote on the wall, *Ali Asghar cried once. So did she. And the world still looked away. She turned to Dr. Yusuf. Do you have a camera? He nodded, confused. take a picture. Send it if you can. Someone out there will see. Someone has to. That image, Layla holding Maryam, the red-stained scarf around the child's shoulders, Haidar beside them, and the message on the wall, would later reach the world. Through underground networks, through journalists brave enough to carry memory instead of fear. It would not go viral. It would not be printed on magazine covers. But it would be seen. And that was enough. As the night deepened and the shelter trembled once more, Layla whispered into her daughter's ear. Ali Asghar didn't die in silence. Neither will you. Maryam blinked. And for the first time in days, she smiled. Small. Faint. But real. A low rumble vibrated through the earth as morning broke, casting a sickly golden light over the shattered city. Layla stood outside the shelter now, not hiding, not crouching, standing. Her black abaya billowed faintly in the dust-laden breeze, and Maryam, now nestled against her chest, stirred beneath the faded keffiyeh that still bore the dried stain of her father's blood. Haidar leaned against a twisted lamppost nearby, legs still wrapped but posture proud. He clutched a slingshot in one hand and a rock in the other, as if daring the sky to try again. Behind them, the mural had begun to take shape, crude yet powerful, painted with ash, clay, and a bit of dye from the clinic's discarded supplies. On one side was a depiction of Ali Asghar in his father's arms, head tilted back, eyes closed. On the other, Maryam, her face lifted, mouth open mid-cry, eyes burning with life. Between them, a river of red stretched, connecting centuries. Children from the neighboring ruins came to look. Women passed by, paused, some weeping, others kneeling to whisper prayers beneath their breath. Dr. Yusuf watched it all unfold from the entrance of the shelter. He no longer tried to stop them. He knew resistance didn't always wear the face of warriors. Sometimes it looked like a mother with trembling hands and a baby who refused to die quietly. "They're coming again," Haidar muttered without looking. "Jet. I can feel it." Layla nodded. "Let them. You're not afraid anymore." "I am," she said quietly. But fear isn't stronger than her cry. A distant thunder rolled in from the north. Black clouds formed unnatural patterns. The hum of drones grew louder. A warning came through the community radio: airstrikes planned for this sector. No one moved. The mural stayed untouched. The people stood. Layla pressed her lips to Maryam's head and whispered, "If they want silence, they came to the wrong place." An explosion tore through the far end of the street. Glass and gravel shot into the air like metal rain. The blast knocked Haidar off his feet. Layla shielded Maryam as best she could, falling to the ground. For a moment all she heard was ringing. No cries. No wind. No sound but the echo of destruction. Then, breathing. Maryam's tiny chest moved. Layla looked down. Her daughter blinked once, twice, and then let out a cry that split through the silence like lightning through smoke. Layla's breath caught. Around her, others were stirring. Survivors. They had not been destroyed. Not yet. She rose slowly, dust clinging to her skin like a second burial. She looked around at the devastation, the broken walls, the bloodied stones, and then at the mural, still intact, untouched by the blast. Even as buildings collapsed, the image of Ali Asghar and Maryam stood tall. That night, Layla sat beneath it, writing by candlelight. Her words were shaky, but each letter carried the weight of generations. "This is not just my story," she began. "It is Karbala's story. It is Gaza's story. It is every mother who has ever held a child while the world turned away. Ali Asghar's blood cried out for justice. Maryam's cry is that echo, refusing to fade." She signed it with her name and placed it inside a small tin box. Haidar sealed it and gave it to a courier who had come through the tunnels with medical supplies. "It'll reach someone," the man promised. "Maybe not the whole world. But someone." The days that followed blurred together, moments of chaos, pockets of peace. But through it all, something had changed. Layla no longer waited to flee. She organized. She spoke. She told the story of Karbala beside the story of Gaza, until people understood they weren't two stories, they were one. Separated by time, connected by truth. Dr. Yusuf grew weaker. One evening, he sat beside the mural, hands trembling. "I used to think Ali Asghar's death was the tragedy," he said. "But maybe it was the beginning." Layla nodded. Maybe his silence made the loudest sound. Maybe Maryam was born to carry that voice forward. Haidar had taken to drawing. His sketches now filled the clinic walls, images of broken towers, of crying children, of stars refusing to fall. In every image, somewhere, a small baby appeared, sometimes in a mother's arms, sometimes in a sling across a boy's back. As weeks passed, a journalist arrived through the same tunnels. A young woman with tired eyes and a camera wrapped in plastic. She had seen the mural in a photo passed along by a smuggler, and she came to find its source. Layla told her everything, about the night Maryam almost died, about the underground clinic, about Haidar's journey through sniper fire, about the cry that had refused to die. The journalist listened, tears in her eyes, scribbling furiously. Then she turned the camera on Layla. "Do you want to send a message?" she asked. Layla looked into the lens. For the first time in months, she did not flinch from the gaze of the world. She held Maryam in her arms and said, "My daughter is not a symbol. She's a child. But her tears are history repeating. You may not hear her over your comfort. But God does. And God remembers." The footage was smuggled out. The story made it to newsrooms, to classrooms, to places where people argued over politics but forgot humanity. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a revolution. But it was a seed. And seeds, like cries, have a way of growing when planted in truth. Months later, Layla sat beneath the mural once more, now faded but still visible. Maryam, healthier, older, crawled beside her. Haidar was teaching other boys how to bandage wounds. Dr. Yusuf had passed on, but his name was spoken with reverence, like a martyr without a battlefield. Layla reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook. Its first page bore the story of a baby who cried in Karbala. Its last page, left blank, waiting for Maryam to write her own. The dust had not stopped falling. The world had not stopped bleeding. But in this place, once defined by death, there was now a whisper of something else.